Hey guys, I'm going to get straight into this because you're probably, if you're watching this, you are already pulling your hair out with the HP EFI dual sync system with a generic loom. Loom, and this is to deal with this particular kit running the 271R 960A loom, which came in the kit with the ECU, and I think the kit part number was 550-604. So generic multi-point fuel injection kit for V8. Now, we're in Australia here, so we don't have the MSD or the Holley dual sync distributor. What we have is an Australian built distributor to fit the Holden 308 cubic inch small block, which is, I guess, lightly or loosely based on an early cast iron 350 or 305 Chev, very similar in its layout. So, but yeah, the Chevy distributors won't fit, so we needed to come up with a system that worked with the original Holden distributor. And in doing so, it may even answer your question too, if you're trying to do a similar thing without going to a different distributor and you don't want to run an MSD, you want to run a conventional coil and a fairly conventional igniter or ignition module, if you want to call it that. There's different terminology for it. Then this is what to do. So, cutting to the chase, I have got a list of things here that I think you should do before you start, because if I'd done it in this order to start with, I think it would have saved a lot of time. One, print the wiring diagram for your loom part number, which is what I've done here. Okay, this number suits the loom number, and I had a couple of A3 copies printed off so I could make different versions for different parts of the system that I was working on. And for example, when I was working on the ignition side of the harness, I crossed out everything that wasn't to do with the ignition. So by eliminating a lot of those, it starts to make it much simpler. Okay, it works for me. It might not work for you, but it's worth a go if you're pulling your hair out. Print the quick start guide under the help menu in contents from the drop down. Okay, in the Holley. So if we go up to, sorry about the glare on the screen guys, help, contents, okay, quick start guide over here, and double click. Okay, so that's your quick start guide. What you want to do is you want to print this off, and you want to read that all the way through. It's only a couple of pages, but there are pointers in there which I didn't find until a few days into trying to get this thing going, and things like they tell you that, you know, if the TPS isn't hooked up, your throttle position sensor, and working and calibrated, nothing else on this system is going to work. You're not even going to get started. So you really need to print yourself out the quick start guide. Lay your loom out on the bench or a table where you can leave it for a while without disturbing it, because it's going to take some time to get this organized. Locate all the loose wires in the loom and on the diagram. Label all the loose wires. So let's kind of start with that. We'll go straight over here. There's quite a bundle of loose wires. You've got 5 coming out of your loom back here. Okay, 2 of these you're not going to use if you're using a dual sync dizzy, or if you're using a Hall effect sensor on your cam and a Hall effect sensor on your crank. You're not going to use the white or the yellow wire in there, so you can kind of, to some degree, forget about those. The other 3 in here are very important, and they are fuel pump wiring. Now, okay, big deal. You probably think that you don't need to have it hooked up. Well, again, nothing's going to work properly until you get those hooked up. Now, I went to the trouble of labeling these. I just taped them on the bench just to keep everything kind of, you know, where it was and tidy. I've put rubber on the bench to keep everything insulated. Nothing on this bench goes to earth all the earths in this system go back to the earth post of the battery. Nothing is earthed through the table or the chassis, if you like. Everything's earthed back through here. So a bit of rubber down helps, just to make sure. A little bit of rubber under the ECU. It's got insulating rubbers in it anyway, but it's just extra protection. So once we get these wires out, they can be labelled. The green wire is what ends up going to your fuel pump to power it, and that green wire comes from the fuel pump relay from the back of here. So that wire there, the green wire there, that's the other end of it here. So you don't need to hook this up to the fuel pump, but you do need the relay in here. The red wire out of this loose lot here, okay, that's constant 12 volts to feed the relay, okay? So pin 87 on the relay. All right, so that can be, you know, bolted to the battery terminal. The black wire is your earth for your relay, okay? So that's the other end of this one here, okay? Obviously you've got your pins marked on your, on your relay itself. Remember to refer to that if you ever get a little bit lost. Just refer to that. So now the red light wire in here that is bridged, connected or spliced if you like to the green wire, this heavy red wire here runs through the loom, and that goes to your injection harness. It powers this wire here, these two wires, so your two banks, okay? Power for one bank of injectors, power for your other bank of injectors. All these other wires here are your switching earths for the injectors back through to the ECU, okay? So if you don't have this powered up, you're not going to have power to your injectors, and you're not going to see any pulse at your injectors, okay? So let's just quickly go over. I know this is a lot to take in. This is all your loose wires. Okay, this one here, white loose, which we're not going to use. This red wire here, switched. Okay, this wire here is essentially your ignition switch. Okay, 12 volt switched, loose, red with a white stripe, goes to pin A10. Okay, pin A10, switch 12 volt into the ECU. Okay, that's this wire here. That's a loose wire that comes out down here, alright, just next to that relay block. So that's your ignition switch. If I put this on here, you'll probably hear the relay click. Okay, you'll hear it click when it first goes on, and then you'll hear it click 5 seconds later when the fuel pump cuts out. Okay, that time can be changed in the config for your ECU, okay, in the V4 software. So once you've got those sorted out, again, I didn't use these, the white and the yellow, don't use them. The other three are for the relay, and that's all hooked up. Now, I guess the real tricky part of this was working out in the manual what wires we wanted to use for our Hall effect sensors. So the instructions in here are a little bit tricky. Let's go to wiring diagrams and manual, and you'll see what I mean. You would have already been here anyway. You would have been pulling your hair out possibly, or you may not have struggled as hard as I am, as badly as I did with this. This doesn't come naturally to me, it's been hard work. So they have different scenarios in here. Okay, ignition adapter, loose wires, we've just been through those. ignition system wiring. So here's where they start going through your different scenarios, okay? Small cap HEI, all right, this, and this is different. This is different to the setup we're doing. So that was not applicable to us. That's not applicable. Non-ECU controlled. We're controlling our timing through the ECU, okay? That wasn't applicable. So we kept going. Magnetic pickup, no, that's not us. Magnetic cam, that's not us. Here we go. So all I did when I did this, like I said earlier, I went to this other sheet and I crossed out everything that wasn't ignition distributor related, okay? Crossed everything out. Then I came to here and we got our crank input, and you got to read this stuff here, okay? Signal yellow. So that's signal that's coming out. That's back into the ECU, okay? That'll be somewhere between 0 and 2.5 volts, or 0 and 12, depending on what type of Hall effect sensors you've got. And you'll have 3-wire Hall effects in your distributor. Ground, of course, and 12 volts supply into the sensor itself, okay? For these tests, I didn't use shielded wire. I've just sort of pushed everything in. I've bared the wires and pushed them into the back of the connector. This is, speaking of which, this is the connector that came in the kit, okay, which plugs into the ignition loom, okay, a 10-pin ignition loom. Alright, so we don't need this. This loom here that's the part number 271R1012A. That's if you are using your ECU for controlling fuel only, not spark. So if you want to control spark and fuel, you're not going to use this, okay? So I pulled the pin out of it. I was going to use this. I just need to buy some pins and utilize this to make my final loom to my distributor, which is going to essentially be 4 wires. So once we worked out, even though this is an example of a Hall sensor on the front of the crank, and our next example down is a Hall sensor on a camshaft, it doesn't matter. We're still using Hall effect sensors. It's just that they're both inside the distributor. So we look at the wiring for the cam, okay, or sync, we call it sync, and we can superimpose those over the top of the wiring here, and it gives us our layout. And the basic layout is that both the sensors in the distributor share a ground wire. They both share power, but they have separate signal wires, of course, back to the ECU. So you end up with one power wire, one earth wire, ground wire, and 2 separate signal wires. And that's exactly what we've got here. Okay, so looking at your ignition plug, if you like, your 10-pin plug, okay, and don't pay too much attention to the colours of these wires. It's what I had. I had some 4-core and that's what I've used. I've bared the wires and I've just pushed them snugly up into here to do some tests. So we've got ref. So ref is crank, is your, if you've got a V8, you're going to have 8 windows, okay, in your chopper wheel. So that is your reference for your crank. So reference goes to this pin here, down here, and I'm pretty sure that's pin A. Let me just check. Yeah, so that's pin A, okay. The one, and that will be a purple wire. So it's those 2 purple wires in the back there. 2 purple wires going in the back. They're both your signals. One for your cam sync and one for your crank reference. And left to right is A, B, C, D, E, okay? So reference into A, your sync wire, which we'll use brown there, goes into the one right next to the other purple wire, into letter B. Now then you've got your shared wires. So this is our power wire in, okay, so that goes, power wire goes in. Once that gets to the distributor, that splices out and it supplies both Hall effect sensors. And green here, which is, I think, in pin C, okay, is your ground. And again, the green goes in, okay, then it's spliced out, and both sensors share a ground. So there you go, you've got your two signals in the center, power on the right hand end, and a shared ground on the left hand end. So you might want to mark your dizzy like how I have. I might need to do another video for that a little bit later. So that's all I've done to hook that up, and I had as soon as we spun this up, we did our TPS calibration. Once we'd done our TPS calibration, we spun the distributor with a handheld drill. We had RPM. So again, I've just pushed wires. If you don't have the right connectors yet, which are a Delphi 150, I think if you want to, or LS, I think LS have these connectors. You might be able to go to a salvage yard and get some LS connectors and get some new pins and terminate it like that. Anyhow, I've put the TPS on and hooked it up to our loom, just with a little patch loom that I've made up. I know this isn't ideal, guys, but it works. Okay, you can bench test this stuff before you try and put all this in the car or on the engine dyno, because it will save a lot of time. So hopefully that's helped you a little bit. Obviously you can hook your maps, hook as much as you can up. Probably don't hook your lambda in, because it will be it's a heated lambda, so you don't really want that sitting there cooking away all the time while you're doing this testing. You don't need that hooked up for now. Once you have got your wiring in here and you're all powered up, you want to back probe your signal wires one at a time, okay, on voltage. So just a nice paper clip gently in the back of here, and just check your voltage as you rotate the distributor and see your voltage going up and down and what that variance is, okay, just to check that your Hall effect sensors are working properly, especially if you're using a distributor from the salvage yard or something like this. What else are we doing? Now, the trigger for, ultimately, what we've talked about so far is getting crank reference and cam reference from the dizzy into the ECU, so the ECU has a signal to use and manipulate, that you can then give the timing a number that you want your advance, okay? So from there, you want a signal or a trigger back out of the ECU, once that's been done, that goes into your ignition module or your igniter. And the wire that you're going to use for that, I'm pretty sure, and this is kind of where I'm up to now, is doing a few tests, but I'm pretty sure you're all going to end up with the ESP out, okay? ESP out, blue and white, pin A28, which if we follow that, okay, A28 is pin H. Okay, so it's pin H, that's the blue and white. Yep, so blue and white into pin H there. Okay, right in the center, it's a bit blurry, sorry guys. So the blue wire, blue and white. So out of there, and I've got the paper clip stuck in it now, okay, that will run from there, and that will trigger, that will go into your ignition module, which in essence, your ignition module is basically a transistorized relay. So the feed into here, or the signal into here, will trigger the base and drop the power out and fire the coil. By going straight off the coil lead when you do your test, obviously you need an earth clamp from here, from the spark plug body onto the earth terminal. And when you spin the distributor, you're going to have 8 sparks per 2 revolutions. Oh, sorry. You're going to have 8 sparks per 1 revolution of the dizzy, okay? Which is, you know, traveling at half the speed of engine RPM. So you're going to get 8 pulses out of your spark, but you can at least test that, okay? What else have we got here? So yeah, here's the A10, pin A10, camshaft Hall effect sensor power in. A14, camshaft Hall effect ground. A22 is cam Hall signal reference. Okay, and same for the crank that we've done here. I've traced them all the way through to this block here, and so here's the 10 pin connector that we've just been looking at over on the bench. Okay, so here's your shared power, E and E. Okay, same thing. Here's your shared ground for your two different sensors, but they have their own reference wires. Okay, back to the ECU. So that should help a little bit. What else have we got here? Locate all loose wires. We've done that. Use ignition wiring for crank hall sensor and cam hall sensor, even though you are using a dual sync distributor. Okay, yep, so we did go through that. Check signal voltages, yep. Connect fuel pump relay and must be operational. Relay only, you just need the relay to be working and clicking for injectors to have power. Hook up TPS and calibrate. Nothing will work until this is done. Okay, probably by this stage you have already been through the quick setup guide and chosen a file which is roughly the same as what you've got as far as cubic inches, power rating, and it'll ask you for your camshaft duration. This one's like 238, 244 at 50 thou lift. So you start putting some of those parameters in, and before you know it, you are going to have some fairly reasonable results. Okay, I hope this has helped. I think I've listed the main things that you need to cover off to at least get a sync out of this thing. What I'll do for you now is I'll just hook up this ignition wire. Okay, sorry guys, I'm just holding it on there with some vice grip so I can disconnect it really quickly if I have to. Okay, because just to be safe. Not ideal, but it works. Okay, so if I turn the distributor for you now, you can hear the relay click when the distributor starts turning. Okay, because the fuel pump will again start, and then it clicks out when we stop rotating the dizzy. Let's get a what do we got? GM. Let's get a GM Noid light, and let's plug it into cylinder 8 on the injector loom. Sorry about being up too close, guys. Trying to film this with one hand is difficult. Bear with me. Okay, so that's a Noid test light. You can make these. There's instructions somewhere on the net. You're going to need a diode and some LEDs and that sort of thing to make your own. If you can make 8 of them, it's really nice because you can watch them flashing in sequence. Okay, but let's just keep our eye on that. I'm going to turn this dizzy by hand. Hopefully quick enough. Okay. See that we got a flash there. I'm just turning that with one hand. Okay. I have had the cordless drill, handheld cordless drill on the shaft here. Make sure you go with the chuck right up onto here to try and avoid the little cutout or the keyway in here. Otherwise the shaft will wobble around a fair bit. So get your chuck right up on there. Gently do it up and spin that. And that's handy too, because once you're live on your EC on your screen here, it enables you to. Let's go. Let's connect USB link. Okay, everything looks okay. Everything's passed. Everything matches. The config hasn't been changed. Let's just bring up our gauges. So obviously it's taken me a little while to get to this stage. We've got our air temp is obviously giving us a reading. Our oil pressure's got a reading of -8. We can go in and we can change the offset on that to correct that. TPS is one of the first things you're going to do when you read the quick start guide. And if I spin the distributor with a drill, we'll see an RPM here. I'll try and sit the phone. Try and sit the phone. Here we go. Just bear with me, guys. No Steven Spielberg, that's for shizzle. There we go. That's the best I can do. Okay, so let's just hang on for a sec. Get the drill. Okay, as I was going there, I pulled my wires out, but it gives you an idea. So yeah, map, if we put some vacuum onto the map sensor, we'll see that moving. Now, sorry, one thing that I've missed. I know this is dragging on, guys, but I keep remembering things that I struggled with. You can't change config, okay, while you're connected and online with the ECU. So if you are online, it's telling us it's online here. Click that off. We're now offline, and now we can go into our ignition parameters. So what you're going to want for a dual sync distributor, in my opinion, okay, this is just my opinion, you might find another way of doing it, I cannot find another way of doing it. You're going to want ignition type, you're going to want to put in custom, okay, and then you want to go into configure. And you want one pulse, okay, this is your crank. One pulse, one fire, okay, you've got 8 pulses in a rotation. Digital falling, okay, cam sensor, single pulse again for your sync. And this one down here, okay, EST output 12 volts, alright. So that's where you want to set. Now that wire there, that is the configuration for this wire here, okay, your blue and white wire, which triggers your ignition module. Okay, now where that's set there, you're going to be somewhere down around 0 volts at idle, at stationary, not running, and that will creep up as you go. But that's basically a 12 volt firing signal to your module. Okay, now once you've made a change in here, where are we? I don't want to change anything, I'll leave it as is. Okay, once you've changed something in here, what you need to then do is you need to click on, you need to link, okay, and when you have changed something, it will tell you, you'll know if something's been changed in the config this most recent time you've been in, because one of these will come up as failed. If you want to send that, okay, send that to the ECU to tell it that the change that you've made you want. You've made changes, you need to turn the ignition off and then back on. So, okay, alright, it's all synced now. You'll then disconnect your ignition, your red and white wire, reconnect, turn it back on, and come back here and go online, and everything's up and working, okay? Anyway, that's all for now. That's 29 minutes of a hell of a lot of talking. If you do have any questions, just post them, I'll see if I can answer them. And I hope that this has helped go a little way. Of course, if you're in Australia and you are doing this sort of conversion, let me know. I'm happy to help out. I'm looking at doing some looms for these, and possibly looking at some different Hall sensors to retrofit into the VT V8 Commodore distributor. Some interesting references that you probably want. You want a Bosch 124 module, ideally, that has no advance mapped into the module. It's basically just to control via ECU. Okay, so you want a Bosch 124. That's the last 3 digits on that one. A couple of other interesting links that I'll try and put the links up below here because we're into 30 minutes now. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck with everything you do, and let us know how you go.